I'm going to present my preliminary study on the experience of severe post-COVID patients who were admitted to the neurological rehabilitation ward where I worked at the Sheba hospital in Israel. Well, the study was focused on the severe and acute post-COVID patients who were admitted with neurological symptoms following their sedation and mechanical ventilation period due to the COVID virus. We know that there are increasing reports of long-term post-COVID and neurological effects, what is now known as post-COVID neurological syndrome. And we know that there are a lot of reports of hallucinations and cognitive disorders and mood and anxiety disorders in post-COVID patients who underwent sedation and mechanical ventilation. These reports are also documented in patients who underwent sedation due to other diseases and conditions. This is not something that's new, but still I wanted to explore their experience. And I found out that the studies on COVID patients usually focus on these main issues: the isolation experience, whether at home or in hospitals, being hospitalized and the hospitalization experience, also being hospitalized in ICU departments for COVID. There are several studies on the prevalence of psychological disorders and cognitive impairment in post-COVID patients, and on long COVID experience of people that were tested positive for COVID, not necessarily experiencing symptoms. And there is only a few exploratory qualitative studies on hospitalized patients during their hospitalization and on their psychological experience, such as the one that is stated here. But my aim was to explore the psychological experience of the severe and acute post-COVID patients while they were still hospitalized and had neurological impairments. I interviewed 11 patients, 9 male and 2 female, who were hospitalized in a neurological ward, and they all had they all were post-COVID patients, or all were initially admitted to ICU with acute respiratory distress syndrome. All underwent sedation and invasive mechanical ventilation for extensive period of time. All suffered post-COVID neurological syndrome, and all admitted in rehabilitation for multidisciplinary rehab. And I interviewed them while they were in the ward and talked to them about their experience throughout the process since they found out they were positive for COVID and until the moment they were in rehab. The method was semi-structured interviews. I interviewed the patients, and these were the questions that I asked them, and through them I tried to understand their experience in different stages of being ill and being hospitalized since the moment of the diagnosis and until now. I tried to figure out their feelings throughout the different stages of the disease and what was the most difficult moment for them, coping with what was the most difficult moment they cope with. I tried to understand whether they felt they recovered from COVID, even though they were not ill with COVID anymore when they were interviewed. I tried to understand the way their families reacted to their situation and the time when they were sedated. And I tried to understand their concept of the future and what lies ahead of them while they were still suffering from neurological problems. So these are the characteristics of the participants in the studies. As you can see, most of them had mechanical ventilation and tracheostomy. 8 of them were also got ECMO therapy for their acute situation. They were they were patients in the second and third waves of corona in Israel. The time they were under sedation varied from 4 weeks or 2.5 weeks to one that was 20 weeks sedated, the longest. The duration they were in neurological rehab was a month or two. And the total time of hospitalization varied from 3 months to 10 months and above. It's a very long period of time not to be at home. So from the time they were diagnosed with COVID and admitted to the ICU, they actually never left the hospital. Or maybe they went for a visit, but they were hospitalized, and they were still in hospital as inpatients throughout the time that from the beginning of their diagnosis. Also, all of them had kids. The interviews were analyzed in thematic analysis, and we discovered 5 themes that emerged from their experience. The first one was the unexpectedness of the turn of events, which led to loss of control. The second one was the need to fill in the gaps, especially those who were under sedation for a long period of time. The third one was the emotional reactions. The fourth one, I'll speak of all the themes in a second. The fourth one was that they didn't have COVID, but they still weren't healthy and were coping with disability. And the final theme was the sense making and meaning making processes they were trying to make while in rehabilitation, to understand their experience and to grow from it, and understand why this had happened to them and what lesson should they learn from this experience. So the first theme was the unexpectedness of the turn of events. All the participants described a common feeling of being out of control and not knowing or being unprepared to what had happened to them, from getting the diagnosis to realizing they are disabled. In each step of the way, whether it's the beginning when they were diagnosed with COVID, and then when they were admitted to the ICU, and then when they found out they are to be sedated, and when they woke up, and when they woke up and felt that they couldn't move, and when they found out how long they're in hospital and how long they're supposed to stay in the hospital because of their physical and neurological dysfunction, and also about the future, they felt that they don't know what's going to happen, that everything didn't happen as planned. Because when they discovered they had COVID, they thought that they were careful enough or vaccinated, and it's not going to happen to them. When their condition worsened and they had to move from their house to the ICU, they didn't expect that to happen. When they went to the ICU, they thought they're going to get oxygen, and that's it, and they're going to go home. But then their condition deteriorated, and they didn't expect being sedated. Those who did think of a possibility of being sedated and ventilated, they thought they're just going to wake up after a few days and everything's going to be okay. And again, they felt the unexpected thing happened. Waking up was unexpected. Waking up with the disability was unexpected. The severity of their neurological and physical dysfunction was unexpected. And of course, all of them found out that they spent more time under sedation than they initially thought of. Here are some of the quotes that I got from the interviews, describing the feeling of unexpectedness, either for getting corona or for deteriorating and for sedation and for waking up. So this theme of unexpectedness and the feeling of I don't have any control over my body and of things that are happening to me or the future, it was a basic theme underlying all the interviews. Another thing that emerged was the need to fill in the gaps. The gaps were for things that had happened while they were asleep, while they were sedated. And the gaps were also sharing what had happened to them, to their families and loved ones. So usually the patients described and mentioned how how they got the information of what had happened to them gradually. They didn't get all the information at once. They were told, first of all, it took them a long time to wake up and to understand where they were, maybe a few days or a few weeks. And then gradually they learned how long they were under sedation. And then gradually they understood how severe their situation was. Some of them were found out that they had only a few they had a high chance of not surviving, and they found out that their families were told that they're not going to make it. They found out the details of every procedure that was done to them. Most of them didn't know that they're going to have a tracheostomy, and they found that out while waking up. And then they found out what had happened to their families while they were sedated for a month or so. And they found out how severe the reactions of the family. From the other side, they found out a lot about the dreams that they had while under sedation, and they found out that their hallucinations were actually dreams and not a reality. And it took them a while to come to terms with the understanding that what they had thought that had happened is really is hallucination due to the drugs that they were given under sedation. So some of them were struggling with trying not to remember what had happened. Others were struggling with remembering and not wanting to share their memories and thoughts with others, and try to ask the families about certain details that they had remembered, trying to figure out whether or not these events actually happened. These are some of the quotes, again, from the interviews regarding to the information that the patients received after they woke up from the sedation, uh, describing their attempt to fill in the gaps with information about what had happened and emotionally reacting to this information, sometimes in a desire not to know all the details, a desire to forget the memories that they've had. One or two patients even described post-traumatic stress disorder reaction to the hallucinations, revealing very hard recurrent dreams of being hurt, of being tortured, of being kidnapped. Maybe these hallucinations were in reaction to procedures that were done to them. One of the patients described remembering like he is under a train pressing on his chest. He doesn't know whether he was given a CPR or whether he had chest pains or having trouble to breathe that may have reacted with his hallucinations. And these memories and the attempt to understand what they represent was part of this theme of trying to understand what had happened while they were under sedation. The third theme was the emotional reaction that these participants experienced throughout their hospitalization. So we could see all through the interview a lot of various emotions that appear in different stages of coping with COVID. Helplessness, a loss of control was present in all the stages of the hospitalization. At the beginning, when they got the diagnosis of COVID, they felt helpless, that they couldn't protect themselves. The loss of control was very present when they described the deterioration in breathing while they were in ICU, to the point that they had no control of their breathing and they felt like they were suffocating. Fear was also absent in every stage. Also, while waking up, fear from they cannot talk to the other people because they have tracheostomy, and they can't understand what had happened to their bodies. They don't feel like their bodies is reacting to them, and it made them very fearful whether or not this condition will change and improve. Sadness and despair was also present, especially in rehabilitation. The process of rehabilitation with physiotherapy, intensive physiotherapy, and occupational therapy was very distressing. They felt like progress is very little in tiny steps. They felt like their need for oxygen, all of them needed oxygen, even in rehabilitation, and they have very low tolerance, made them very desperate, and hopelessness was a very common emotion while thinking of how long will this need to be in rehabilitation. Most of them felt sadness of their families who had to cope with the possibility of losing them, and sadness for the time lost and for the hardships that their families has to cope with. A lot of feelings of gratitude and bliss and hope, positive feelings also arise in each stage. When they woke up and found out that they didn't die, they were grateful. When they felt that they had small progresses, like they could get up of a wheelchair and move again, move their arms. They felt bliss and gratitude, and a lot of them felt hopeful that the future will bring more progress, and that maybe they can return to the way they were before they had COVID. Another emotion that emerged was shame, especially because of their dependency and disability. They were unable to move, unable to go to the bathroom, unable to do things alone. They felt ashamed. They felt that they had they are that they are a burden to their families, and they felt shameful that their families see them in such a bad condition. And this was also one of the strongest emotion. The fourth theme discussed their feelings, whether they feel sick or not at the moment, since they don't have anymore, they don't have COVID anymore, they're negative for COVID test, but still they are disabled. So upon arriving at rehabilitation, all of them had the diagnosis of critical illness polyneuropathia. Most of them needed oxygen, and even while sleeping or while lying down, and they were all physically impaired in movement. Most of them in wheelchairs, unable to move their arms and legs. And all of them had a sensation, had impairments, and couldn't walk or even talk for a long time before they were getting tired. Some, I think, two of them still had tracheostomy, and uh, these disabilities were very present in their interviews. They talked in great length of their day-to-day routine, things that they are not able to do by themselves, how they are unused to feeling disabled, unused to their body being as it was, or feeling that it felt heavier than they remember before being sedated. Before their sedation, their only worry was the fact that they couldn't breathe, that they felt that breathing was very hard on them. But while waking up, they felt that their whole body has changed. Some of them didn't even recognize the way their body changed because of the weight loss, the extreme weight loss they had during sedation. Some patients lost 30 kilos and more, and they didn't know themselves at all. They also they didn't eat, and they didn't drink for a long time, so their feeling of their body was changed. They detailed it in great length, the day-to-day coping with the pain, with the dependency on others, the inability to move, the hardship of the exercises. And this was a very present theme all through the interviews, and it appeared that it represents the day-to-day the day-to-day hardships that they are coping with at the moment of rehabilitation, when it wasn't present in the previous stages of their hospitalization. At discharge, most of them, but all but one were discharged from the hospital after several months. Most of them still needed oxygen when they were discharged, and had low tolerance at walking long distances, or making physical efforts. Um, some of them were able to move freely without the need of crutches or walker, but three or four had still had to use wheelchairs while walking, while going out, because they had such low tolerance. But the time at rehabilitation wasn't only coping with the disability and the fears of what won't be the same as before. It was also a time of sense making and meaning making of the whole experience to a coherent narrative about what had happened to them. So you could see throughout the interviews the way that they are trying to make sense of what had happened to them by asking questions like, why this happened to me, why this happened to me right now in my life, and try to make to give answers or make meaning that related to the way the life the way they lived the life before the disease. But two were all the participants, but two were Orthodox, religious Orthodox, Jews and Arabs, Muslims, and all of the Orthodox participants made meaning that was coherent with their way of life and their beliefs, such as God gave me a second chance to life. So if I try to describe the various ways of meaning making and sense making to the ways that these two groups differentiate, you can see that the non-Orthodox participants try to understand the way that the disease entered their life through their personal choices as an explanation to why they had contracted COVID in the first place. One of the patients described how she worked intensively before, and that she needed a restart, a period of resting, and this was the way to get such a rest, ironic way. The Orthodox participants described all the experience and why they had COVID and why they had a severe form of COVID as a test from God, an intervention that was supposed to make them understand that God is the one deciding what will happen to who. And they felt that this experience had strengthened their belief, because they felt that it was a divine intervention specifically for them, that they were chosen to be in such a severe case, and then chosen to live and not die. Some of them described feeling that everybody else around them in the ICU died, and they were the only one who were given a second chance to live. And this, it seems that these meaning-making processes made sense to them and made their experience more culpable, because dealing with the physical and neurological deterioration left them with a lot of questions. And by making meaning to this process as an experience designed by God, it made the hardships and the coping with the disability meaningful to them, and something that they can grow out of and learn an important lesson for the future. All of the participants experienced, assessed that they are supposed to learn a lesson from this experience, and they shared their lessons. Most of their lessons were supposed to help them live a better and closer life. purposeful life. Some of them described the notion that they are supposed to give back to the community that had prayed for them and that had helped their families cope. They have to give back to the community and get close to the community. So this was something very present in the interviews. If I conclude, the study found that the severe COVID patients had to cope with a lot of difficulties and a lot of acute life-threatening conditions that changed their lives completely, not just physically, but also spiritually and psychologically. They had went through feeling loss of control and almost dying, and then waking up with a disabled body after losing a lot of time of their life, and had to make sense of what had happened to them and why this had happened to them. Most of them said that they didn't understand what was going on, and it would have been better for them if they had detailed explanation of what was expected to them. Even those under sedation said that they had heard voices of the staff, voices of the nurses and doctors, and maybe if someone would have explained to them, even after sedation, what is happening to them, it would have been easier for them to feel in control, because they felt like every time they wake up into a reality that feels like an hallucination, and they don't really understand what was going on. Even in rehabilitation, some of them expressed a notion that they don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going to happen next. Also, these findings highlight the psychological need for support to facilitate sense making and meaning making processes while still in a hospital and not after discharge. If you have any questions or
Uh, Dr. Hubbard, do you have any questions for her? You are on mute.
I don't hear you.
Microphone. Now, do you
Yes,
hear me now?
yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. How many of your 11 patients had been vaccinated?
All but one, I think. One had an allergic reaction that prohibited it from being. The doctor recommended that she wouldn't be vaccinated, but all of them had vaccination.
All the other had vaccination.
This was the
So,
second wave. They
okay,
weren't patients from the first wave. They were vaccinated.
they were vaccinated. Okay. So it was a breakthrough of vaccination.
Not all of them were vaccinated twice, but all had.
Oh, I see. So the vaccination was not completed in all patients.
I'm not a doctor. I'm a medical psychologist, so I didn't consider all the medical explanations for why they were deteriorated, why they get
Oh, I
acute.
see.
So my research was on the psychological experience, not on the medical aspect of it. But they were all, but one vaccinated at least once.
But the thing is that complete vaccination normally prevents a severe courses of disease.
I know.
So
Still, I'm not. Still, some of the patients who were vaccinated did get severely ill. I
okay.
didn't concern myself with why they did it. Some had background issues, but I was interested in their experience.
Okay, sure, of course. you had another approach to it. Okay, thank you very much.